and welcome to Autism in Conversation with Auticon, a new podcast from Auticon, a global IT consultancy whose consultants are all autistic. This brand new series is designed to help raise awareness of what it means to be autistic through fascinating conversations. Hosted by me, Carrie Grant, each episode will feature interviews with leading voices on autism, including figures from the business world, autistic social media influencers, and autism academics alike. We'll be talking about the many benefits of hiring neurodiverse talent, through to some of the more common challenges faced by autistic adults navigating the workplace. All my 4 children are neurodivergent, so this is a subject very close to my heart. I'm really looking forward to facilitating some great conversations about autism and hopefully learning some new things along the way. I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Autism in Conversation with Auticon. This time, the panel and I will be talking about depictions of autism in the media. And by media, we mean fictional media. From Oscar award-winning Hollywood movie Rain Man through to the more recent representations in soap operas and documentaries, we'll be talking about what it means to see autism displayed across the big and small screens, literature and beyond. Are depictions of autism a good or a bad thing in the media? Maybe both. And what are the longer-term repercussions? And what does this mean in areas of real life, such as in our instance, the workplace, which is really what we're talking about here on these podcasts. Joining me to discuss these points are Dan Jones, founder of YouTube channel The Aspie World, Ella Tabb, who's also more commonly known on their social media channels as Purple Ella, Tylan Grant, the Hollyoaks actor who happens to be one of my children, and Connor Ward, who's an autistic speaker, consultant and social media content creator. So first up, can we talk? I mean, we have to talk about Rain Man, guys. I mean, I can't imagine that any of you are going to say, I'm so pleased that film was made. Is there anyone out there amongst you guys that feels positively about Rain Man? Dan, you're kind of giving me the thumbs up. Fire away.
Okay, let me just put this out there. Rain Man is a fantastic movie. And if you're looking for a movie to talk about savant syndrome, it's fantastic. And that's it. But when people compare savant syndrome to autism in the respect of like 80% of the autistic people around there who, you know, out there in the world who are not savants, then it has no comparison. So yes, Rain Man's a great movie, and I've seen it, and it's fantastic. It's heartwarming, and everyone cries at the end. It's great. Tom Cruise, I love it. But it is not autism representative, and this is the biggest thing. So it's not a problem with the movie. I'd like to say that I don't have a problem with the movie. I have a problem with its relationship to autism. You know what I mean?
That's a really good point, Dan. I would love to know from the rest of you. Let's go over to Ella. What has the impact of Rain Man had on your life, would you say?
Rain Man is a fantastic movie, but the fact that whenever I meet someone and say that I'm autistic, the first point that their brain goes to is Rain Man is the issue with Rain Man. And it's not because of the fact that Rain Man exists, it's because of the fact that there's a lack of other representation of different types of presentations of autism or what that might look like out there for people to access. I think the other issue with Rain Man is that it was made at a time when people were not necessarily consulting with autistic people, working with autistic people, or like using the voice of autistic people to influence the writing of and presentation of characters, let alone working with autistic actors to play those characters. So it's just kind of its time in a way. It's just a legacy that's a bit of an issue, you know?
So it's 30 years since the film was made. You think we'd have got a few more representations. Connor, how has Rain Man affected you?
I hate it because I probably have savant syndrome. It's never been diagnosed, but it just means it's an obvious comparison that I get socially. Of course, like I like to try and defy stereotypes, and then so many of my behaviours can actually be compared to that depiction. So it's a blessing and a curse in some ways, but ultimately it still is the default depiction of autism in I would say perhaps the older generations who watched the film that came out at the time and have had that film in their consciousness for the last 30 years. And I really do think it's become a comparison point. As the other two have said, it's a presentation, but unfortunately to a lot of people it's the presentation.
Absolutely. I think what you guys have said about it being the first thing that people are going to mention. What about for you, Tylan? You're only 20, so it came out a decade before you were even born. But do you experience people saying anything about Rain Man to you?
I actually haven't. I've never had it been brought up when I've told someone I'm autistic, and I've never actually watched the movie myself.
Guys, there's hope. Let's a big round of applause that things are moving on.
Yeah, I think if anything, I get like Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, but other than that, I never heard of Rain Man until I heard other autistic people talking about their experiences of being like compared to it and stuff like that. Maybe it's just, I think it's an age thing, where I just haven't watched it. I don't know.
And for you, Tylan, then, growing up, where would you have seen other autistic people? In your music or in your telly, or did you have were there any role models? Was there anyone around you that you could see yourself in?
I feel like there was a lot of undiagnosed autistic people that I was just innately quite drawn to growing up. Even in characters, there's always that like quirky, like manic pixie dream girl kind of trope that they like to put in movies where it's so obvious that they're autistic and they're just meant to be like the quirky character. So like Cher from Clueless even, who I thought was really cool. Like she's so obviously like neurodivergent. But I think there was definitely a lack of representation growing up, and I never saw any autistic people that I was inspired by that was like openly like or diagnosed or anything like that. I remember watching, I don't know, Glee, and there being an autistic character, but it was like kind of a joke. So there was never, it was always kind of like the butt of the joke. It was never actually like real representation.
Thanks for that, Ty. Dan, what do you think the impact is on someone if you're looking at media growing up, or, you know, you get your diagnosis and, you know, maybe that's a later diagnosis and you can't see yourself represented anywhere?
Well, you feel ostracized from society, don't you? You feel on the fringe of what's accepted as typical. You know what I mean? So if you're growing up and not seeing yourself reflected in society, or you don't relate to people on the big screen, or you don't relate to people on your entertainment kind of outlets, then you start to feel like, oh God, especially when I was growing up. You know, I grew up from like, I was born in '86, so I grew up in like the mid '90s, and you know, you never saw any kind of autistic characters. So I felt really estranged from society, and I think that has a huge impact on not just how the person sees themselves, you know, in their condition, but their mental health as well, and how that can really impact them and hit their confidence. You know, so it's a difficult thing to have confidence being autistic anyway. But even bigger than that, you know, and this is one of the things. Actually, this is the main key point of the why of what I do on YouTube. You know, why do I want to be, you know, a big YouTuber? Why have I got such a big YouTube channel? Because there are no, you know, when I started watching YouTube and putting information out, there was no autistic creators that anyone could look up to. So a little kid who's autistic and loves Minecraft, you know, you got Minecraft channels, but you got no autistic channels. You know, so this is one of the things I wanted to do, is create a character that people can relate to, and it's there for them to have that representation with. And I think that's the future of that. But yeah, growing up, if you have no one to relate to, you're in a deficit of confidence, really, in my opinion.
And Ella, you obviously have created Purple Ella. What is it about Purple Ella that really drew you to want to create who you are publicly in that way?
Well, I guess I'm still being blown away by the concept of Cher from Clueless as a neurodivergent character, because that was my favourite film growing up, and I've never
Really?
I've seen it like 20 times, and I've never considered that. I'm going to watch it today and be like, okay, thanks for that.
I watched a TikTok and it's very, very eye-opening.
Yeah, I'd never thought of that. I literally love that film. Okay, anyway, I'll answer the question.
Sorry,
now.
Ella, I gotta say, me too. I was like totally like, what? And then the whole like dress thing with the computer, you know, made a whole computer program. I love it.
She's a control freak, isn't she?
Man.
Yeah.
I feel it's really bad for me to admit that I've never seen Clueless.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, you need
get
to
on
watch it
that.
right now.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
amazing.
all
It's
the
got
signs
Paul
were
Rudd,
there.
lovely Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd, amazing.
I love Paul Rudd, such a lovely man.
I love the way
Anyway.
that this podcast is
What was
now
the
being
question?
used to educate in a whole different realm from what we'd intended it for.
Just
But
completely
Ella,
derailed this one.
talk me through Purple, Ella.
Okay, yeah. So I was born in the late 70s. I'm super old, and there were no representations of media, and in particular, there were no representations of media and people that weren't born as men. For me to access. And so everywhere that I looked, I found generally white cis men talking about autism or playing autistic characters, and I didn't find me. And so because I have a history of being a performer, I trained originally as a contemporary dancer and a circus artist. I kind of thought, right, okay, how can I combine my passion for performing but also give, I guess, a picture or a voice to people like me, especially older people who were born female, I guess. So I started talking about autism on the internet because that seemed like an accessible way for me to start doing that, which is how what I do was kind of born. And I do get a lot of feedback from people saying that is what they've gotten from my work. So I guess job done.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you, actually. So the feedback to people being able to see you, particularly I think for those assigned female at birth who sometimes don't get the diagnosis as quickly, having those representations must be even more important.
Yeah, exactly. There are so many people who are born female around my age and younger, right down to my youngest club member is 14, who are saying, I see you and I see myself and I see possibility and I see someone else who is experiencing the things that I'm experiencing and reflects me, and that makes me feel valid. And I think that's why we need lots of different representations of autism in the media, so that everybody can find their Cher from Clueless or Anne of Green Gables or Belle from Beauty and the Beast or whoever it is, they can find them and feel valid.
What would you say to this, Conor? I notice you're like, yeah, I want to talk. Yeah.
So for me, I'm so glad that because I'm 23 now, I was 18 when I got diagnosed. So that was my discovery point. And I didn't go to fiction because I didn't want to. Like, I knew that I'd seen some stuff. I believe I saw someone in Waterloo Road who was also, the victim of, I think, Tylan, something similar to what you were describing with, I can't remember what it was.
Glee.
Glee,
Yeah.
Glee, that was it. Yeah, something similar to that. And I went on YouTube, and the person I saw, I'm very glad to be friends with nowadays. But yeah, it was Dan. It was Dan who liked Pokemon and Minecraft. And yeah, so for me, I like the fact that worked for me. That doesn't work for everyone. So I'm grateful we're in an age where we are diversifying the representation there. More and more people speaking up on social media, but also, the representations are increasing.
And for you, Ty, you're the first Black autistic person on our screens playing a character that was autistic, playing Brooke in Hollyoaks. What has been the response to you playing that character?
I think that at first, some people didn't actually know that I was autistic in real life, which is quite a common thing when you see people playing autistic characters. I got that quite a lot, like, are you actually autistic? And I completely understand that because so often people are kind of speaking for us and being us, but not actually, being autistic. And I actually had a lot of people say that was like the first time that they had seen someone that looks like them or that they can see themselves in on screen. And it just meant a lot to me. And I know that I didn't have that growing up. So to see people that are also quite young having that kind of representation and being able to be seen and understood meant a lot. I even had people that were questioning if they were autistic or in the process of getting diagnosed, and they were like, wow, I'm going to consider looking into this because I really relate to your character and everything's kind of adding up, which is why representation is so important.
Especially as you say, I know that Ella spoke about, it's white guys. You've also got someone such as yourself where you've got all those intersections going on. You've got your non-binary side, you've got your being mixed race. For young children watching telly, or certainly Hollyoaks would probably be more likely to be teenagers, they may have never seen an autistic person of colour.
Yeah.
So that's quite extraordinary. What's the response to you, Dan, with your channel? What do people make of you?
Oh goodness, that's a question. What people make of me and what people make of the channel are two different things, I guess. Because like I'm a bit, when you're putting a persona out to resonate with an audience, as anyone who works in entertainment media knows, that you mask everything you do. It's an act, isn't it? You put on a persona to say, this is my performance person. How's it going? We're on the show. We're going to talk to these people. Everything's great. But then they get to my house and I'm like, oh, I need to sleep, And so there's a huge difference between me and the show. Now, I'm the biggest autistic YouTube channel on YouTube, which is cool. It's crazy, but it's cool. And the feedback is really good. The feedback is twofold. I get the autistic people messaging saying, it's really nice to know that you're so open and honest about the things, so if something it happens in my life, it's embarrassing, or if I make a mistake with something because of my condition, I talk about it. I tell them I'm not afraid to be open and honest, because being open and honest is the only way you're going to really show people real life. And so I get that kind of back from the autistic community. And then the parents of, or the people who are working with autistic individuals, then they come to me and they say, oh, wow, like you've literally just helped me really channel the help and support I needed for my kid. And now I've signed them up to this program, or, they're going through a diagnostic process, and it's really helped them. So the feedback is really positive. We get very marginal kind of hate comments, really. Negative is very, 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 very small. The only negative some people get, and Ella kind of touched on this, is like, oh, he's a cis white male. But that, I can't help, who I was being born. And you know what I mean? What the heck has that got to do with it? I'm just trying to help people, it makes no difference. And so, but I think what it's doing, the feedback is that it was needed, the show was needed. Like Connor said, Connor found me. That's how I know Connor. He found me through the channel, and I found Ella because of a similar thing. We were both in the autism show together, and Ella seen some of my stuff, I'd seen some of her stuff, and so it's needed. We needed that kind of that representation of ourselves. And something that I was just thinking about when you guys were talking is that there are more autistic characters being dropped into certain shows, like the Daniel Tiger show. I'm interviewing the character who plays the autistic person on Daniel Tiger, which is like a kids TV show. And the interesting thing about it is that it's for kind of little kids, like primary school age kids. And that show has an autistic actor playing an autistic kid in it, and they teach all about that, and how how the play may be different, and how they may not understand certain things, which is great. And I think more of that is needed, and I think starting at that kind of level is excellent as well. But it's just something that I just remembered, that like they are trying to put autistic characters into kids TV shows now, because we've started to see wheelchair users in cartoons, right? So it's time that kind of like comes to neurodivergent people as well.
They had that in Sesame Street too.
Yeah,
that's so funny. Connor was literally about to speak, and then Tylan said the actual words that Connor was about to say.
Really? Oh my god!
You take it. You take it. It's fine.
You can have that one.
But the thing is, Connor and Tylan, it is difficult to try and portray something that's so uniquely individual to every person who has a condition in a broad show. Sesame Street, they try. They may not have the best consultants, and they're trying. And the fact that they try is half of the battle. Like, okay, great, they're listening. At least they're taking into consideration. Now let's work on actual representation in a way where it's actually getting shown. But with the Daniel Tiger one, I think it was a great idea as well. But it's so subtle in that, like, they're not like loading him like Sam from Atypical, which I helped Netflix kind of overturn that, because Netflix consulted me for season 2 and 3 of Atypical, because they'd given this autistic character and they loaded it with all of these kind of like traits.
Every trait, yes.
It's just completely unrealistic, it's never worked. And so we worked on that. But I think it's just that, like we've got halfway there. And I think it's like the rest of it. But I am working on a show. I don't know if Connor, I might have told you this, but I'm working on a show with CBS. I've written a kids TV show. So a kids TV show for autistic kids, because there isn't one. And so I've worked on one, and we scripted out like 2 seasons, and I'm working with CBS to maybe put that through. But again, we'll see how far we get, because as we know, TV kind of is so flaky with autism representation. Who knows?
And there is Pablo. Does anyone watch Pablo, the kids animated show with all the different aspects of autism represented by
they're like different
animals?
animals, right? Yeah,
I like that show. I think that's pretty good for small children. I could enjoy
I
it.
really like atypical.
There is a...
Yeah, so do I.
Let me just get back to Tylan just for a moment, because we're on the subject of representation. The character of Brooke that you play in Hollyoaks has got a really broad range of different things that Brooke is about. Brooke is not just an autistic person. Brooke is someone who's got parents who are splitting up. Brooke is someone who got pregnant. Brooke is someone who decided to put their baby up for adoption. So we get a broader picture of Brooke than just Brooke's autism. But one thing I wanted to ask you, because I think that people sometimes struggle with this with you, is how like Brooke are you?
That's an interesting question, because I do feel that I'm quite different from my character, although a lot of the traits that Brooke displays, I also definitely relate to, and I feel like my character, as they've grown and I've grown, I feel like they've developed their personality and the way that they see the world and stuff. So they're kind of ever changing, especially as a young adult. I relate to a lot of the ways that they internalize or understand things, and social cues and things like that. They're very deadpan sometimes. They see things in black and white, and I definitely relate to that a lot. There are some differences, and I remember when I first joined, there was my character was meant to be played. So I really don't like the term high functioning or low functioning. I think it's really problematic, but I think my character was meant to be a bit lower functioning and
higher support needs. I heard Dan use this earlier, and I've coined it straight away: low support needs or higher support needs. So it's maybe a little bit more.
I'm going to start using that.
Yeah.
That's a lot better. I think that they're higher support needs, but even in that, it's I don't know. Maybe it's more visible, but I think everyone sometimes needs that. Just even if they don't, look like they do. And
100%.
I think that Brooke definitely had that. I don't know. We're quite different, but at the same time, quite similar.
Yeah. So there's similarities. One thing I wanted to ask you guys then, because you all got diagnosed a little bit older. Tylan was 7, so quite young, but you guys are a little bit older. What concerns me, and this is as a mum and also just part of our community, is the first place that people are going to go on when they're thinking about being assessed or getting a diagnosis is they're going to go online, and they're going to look online and they're going to see what's written about autism. What can I learn about autism? And I'm not sure that we have nearly as positive an internet as we need for our community. So I'd love to just ask you guys, what was your first impression? I don't know, Tylan, because you were so young. I'm not sure if you would have a sense of that, but certainly, well, you can all answer. Dan, let's go to you first. What was your first, what was the first thing you did? How did you find out about autism and therefore about yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was diagnosed at 26, officially with Asperger's syndrome at the time, because that's what it was. The lower support needs is Asperger's syndrome. So I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and ADHD and OCD at the same time, and I previously had dyslexia and a bunch of other kind of attachment or all this kind of stuff, right? And so I literally knew nothing about autism. So I came home and I was giving a National Autistic Society leaflet. So I thought, okay, I'll check those out. But for me, being a tech nerd, I went straight onto YouTube and I was like, okay, autism, and I found nothing of any relevance, which is the reason I started my channel, the reason I started what I was doing. So the representation, what I found online was very clinical, non-personal and non-relative information. Or some of the information would be relative, like, hey, you have a relationship with objects, and I was like, okay, I get it. But in terms of like having a personal kind of somebody to who was blogging or talking about their experiences, there was nothing. And so I found it very. I was just completely lost. Here's your diagnosis. Get out. See you later. Bye bye.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Weird.
I hear that. Connor,
I did that. I started the channel because of that.
Connor, Dan has just said there he didn't really find any. He said nothing of any relevance. What was your experience?
So similarly to Dan in the whole clinical stuff, I got the NHS website and a list of deficits I apparently had. And that was my first introduction to it.
Defined by deficits?
Yeah, defined by deficits. This is what's wrong with you. That's not what you want to hear. The whole point of diagnosis and having that confirmation is to allow yourself the opportunity to explore your individual strengths and weaknesses. You don't want to be hit with these are what society perceives to be your weaknesses, because this is the thing that we often forget as well. Many things that are autistic strengths have just been are only being seen as strengths nowadays. They're always things that have been pathologized in the past. Attention to detail. Oh, they focus too much on certain things.
Yeah.
The list goes on. Yeah.
How about you, Ella? What was your first insight?
Yeah, well, I was diagnosed around the time when sort of blogging was becoming really, really massive. And what I found were the blogs of parents of autistic children. I am the parent of an autistic child, and I don't want to make the parents of autistic children feel like they shouldn't speak about their experiences, but that was my first experience. I wasn't finding autistic people speaking for themselves. I was finding the parents of autistic people speaking about their children, and sadly at that time often in quite a negative way, because and this was not the fault of the parents, because that's how autism was being presented to the parents of autistic children as well. And I also found a lot about children and not a lot about autistic adults. So I kind of felt like maybe the world seemed to think that you can no longer be autistic when you're an adult or something like that. And that was confusing for me.
Wow. You just unpacked so much there, said so much that needs unpacking. Tylan, I noticed you nodding away there when they said the parents talk. So I'm going to shut up now. What were your first impressions of being, or at what point, maybe not at 7, but when you started to realise, okay, I'm an autistic person, what did you first see?
I think that at first, like I think it was a very similar experience to what you guys have been saying. Like, I just saw the negatives. I didn't know that there were any like positive attributes to being autistic, or at least like I wasn't really taught about it. Because I already kind of felt like an alien. So I was like, oh, it helps because I know why I feel this way, but then at the same time, it just I don't know what the word is, clarified how I was feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does.
I think that I remember in school I wouldn't tell people, and then I told someone that I was autistic, and then I got so embarrassed that a couple months later I saw them in M&S, and I was like, hi, by the way, that thing I told you before, like it's not true. And then he was like, oh yeah, I know, because then you'd be in a special school. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't, there's just no like understanding of my experience, and it's just such a lack of like education. And even for me, because I'm kind of like, as a young child, just internalizing what everyone's saying about it, because I don't know, it's a funny one.
What we're saying there is they're not. Well, I don't think anyone has said anything positive about the first impressions that you had. And we mentioned that Rain Man is 30 years old. I don't think we can, and we've talked a little about the A words. We know that there are programs with autistic people in them. Can we touch on SIA? making the film called Music, and then using a non-autistic actor to play the role of an autistic character. I can feel Connor next to me chomping at the bit, so I'm going to go over to Connor first.
We are no longer in the age of neurotypical people portraying autistic people. We're in an age of representation. I understand the fact that film had taken quite a few years to develop, meaning that it was kind of 2017 attitude and such, but it was being delivered in 2021. So it's just quite simply, it's not appropriate, is the first point. Never mind when you go into the details of the depictions. We want to do things that challenge stereotypes. We don't want to fall into the trap of further.
And for
making people
you,
believe in them.
Dan, how did you feel about that situation with the Sia film?
I mean, do you know, I got mixed feelings about it. I did quite a few videos on it, actually. And, it was very annoying because, I think, like Connor said, we're not in an age where we need to have neurotypical people playing autistic characters. There's plenty of autistic talent out there that you could just pull from, which is a great thing because it would show a lot. And I get the kind of the comparison argument. They'd say, well, Dan Aykroyd, who's an autistic man, plays a neurotypical person in Ghostbusters. So why wouldn't it be the same the other way around? I get it. I get the argument, right? It makes sense, right? You just have people are people and they just play whatever. But it's 2020 it came out, 2019 it came out, which doesn't account for the fact that, autistic people have been pushed to the side forever. Autistic actors just like, they're always the bottom of the pile. It's just the fact that she took Maddie Ziegler to play, she always chooses for everything, to play this character, and the way she plays it is so cringy and like makes me feel a bit inside when I watch it. I don't know if you guys have the same thing, but when I've seen the clips, it's just a bit like, I don't know, it's off-putting because she's playing, it's almost like she's making fun of, and I don't know how else to explain it. That's what it feels like. And so, I'm backing up with what Connor said. Connor said, we're in an age where we've got hundreds and thousands of really great autistic talent pool to Tylan, great actor, autistic actor. It's easy to find good autistic actors now, and there was no excuse for Sia to do it. And the thing that most annoyed me about it was Sia's response. And we all reached out, and Ella's done it, I did it, Andy, we all did it. We all reached out and said, "Hey, you made a big mistake here. What do you have to say about it?" Rather than being like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have." She just got really defensive and started swearing at people and saying, "You're a rubbish actor and you don't do this." I thought, well, that's no attitude to have. Like I said, the only comparable argument she'd have is saying like, "Well, I didn't really think it was a problem because you get autistic people playing non-autistic people and what I mean." But it wasn't even that. She didn't use that argument. She was just hell bent on trying to defend her image because she's creative, but it wasn't creative. And that's just my thoughts on it. I know we could go for hours talking about it, but I think she did a very bad consult beforehand, and that's my honest opinion from the research I found. And I think Alan would kind of like back this up as well. Like the consultations that Sia had beforehand were just like almost non-existent, and the story changes all the time, so who knows?
Yeah. Ella, what went wrong there?
Oh gosh, where do I start? I should start by saying I haven't seen it. I refuse to watch it. My issues with the Sia situation were, firstly, everything that Dan has said, so I don't need to repeat that, but specifically her response to the community when we did try to educate her on the topic. The images that came out of that movie, the pictures that you see of Maddie with her headphones on and her face kind of contorted, were just not a very positive representation. From what I've heard from people that watched the film, it was a sensory nightmare to watch. So she created a film about autistic people that autistic people could not watch. And I have a very interesting theory, because around the time that all this was going on, I was listening to a podcast. I think it was maybe Louis Theroux was talking to Sia around the time that Music came out, but it must have been recorded before all the backlash. And she talked about a lot of the issues that she'd had through her life with, rejection sensitivity and substance issues and needing things to be in order and struggling with social situations and spending a lot of time at home with her dogs because she couldn't handle people. And honestly, I'm not going to diagnose Sia, but there is a part of me that wonders whether Sia might be in some way neurodivergent. And this whole terrible situation that occurred could kind of be quite ironic if that were the case.
Yeah. Well, so talk about educate yourself. That's why it's so important, isn't it? That we are able to go online, look at stuff and say, this is not for me. This is not going to be helpful for me. Where are the positive images that we need? Now, I just want to talk about let's say the last couple of years, let's say since lockdown. Do you think that things have improved in terms of having more positive examples of autistic people out there whose profiles are raised, even these people here on the podcast who've got YouTube channels, who've got big social media presence, you on Hollyoaks? Do you think things are improving?
I think that we have a long way to go, definitely, and there can be a lot more being done, but I do think that things are improving. I've been on, I think, TikTok quite a lot and seen a lot of like representation there, and actually like learned a lot about myself and being autistic through like education on that app. It's crazy like what a 1-minute video can teach you. So I feel like I've been seeing a lot more like representation there, and like also been seeing a lot of like non-autistic neurotypical people be like, oh my gosh, like this is really interesting and accessible for everyone to learn. So I think that in terms of like, I mean, I know there's different forms of media, that for me has been, I've noticed an improvement, and I do feel like things are improving.
Yeah, you're actually the stats on that are. You're right, absolutely right, Tylan. There have been more diagnosis of ADHD because of TikTok, apparently, during lockdown. It had a really profound effect.
That makes sense.
I assume that would spill a bit into our autism community as well with what you're saying there. Let's go over to Dan. Do you think we're getting better? What more could be done?
Oh, we're 100%. We are getting better. We're moving in the right direction. That's a way to say it. And I think, having good imagery, like that's what Ala really touched on about the whole seer thing. It's like everything that was coming out of the movie was just saying like, autistic people are difficult to deal with. This is a hard time for you. It's a diagnosis is a bad thing. And I think moving away from those concepts of it's a bad thing and then trying to give it kind of it's just a different thing. That's all it is. And I think that's kind of like where we're needing to go, and it is getting there. Like I said, Atypical. I think Atypical is a great series on Netflix. Yeah, I think they made a mistake with the first season of like how Sam was portrayed, but it did get better. And I think that more shows like that are becoming more. How can I explain? It's more the word normalized in the sense of like flattening out curves, normalizing situations where you have autistic characters in a group of people because it's just a group of people and they're going to be autistic people there. Like from Community, is it Abed from Community? Just a guy who's got Asperger's diagnosis or whatever. Okay, cool. We're just seeing autistic people in general life, and it's not a big like, by the way, that person's autistic. It's just like okay, it's an autistic person. There's a guy from Greece over there. It's just something that is just normalized in society. But I think if we continue on this path, it's going to be good. But if we continue to allow people like Sphere to put quite damaging imagery out and changing a narrative, and it's not only Sia, we all have a responsibility to do it. Some of the influencers that I know online, they're putting out some content which is quite detrimental to the autism community as well, in a way where they argue and bicker about things and they say things that becomes negative, and it looks like the autism community is just this ball of angry fire rather than people who are trying to educate people. So there is a responsibility on not only the community itself and the entertainment industry, but the people who are putting that information out, the social influencers. And I think if we continue in that trajectory of just putting information out, getting more characters on TV, I think we're going to be in a good place in about 10, 15 years.
I loved it. I loved everything you said there, Dan, until you said 10 to 15 years. I want it to happen in 10 to 15 months. I'm going to come to Connor last. Let's go to Ella next. What do you think we're doing quite well? How have we been doing over the last couple of years? And what do you think looking into the future? What do we need to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would completely agree that TikTok has had a massive influence on the growth of knowledge about autism, I think, because unlike other social media platforms, you just kind of get given what you get given. So you don't have to specifically go and seek out an autistic creator to be watching their content. And I really love that. It's a bit of a mixed blessing because some information is coming out which isn't accurate, but overall I think that's a positive thing, and there's lots of different representation, and it isn't all white, because I think that's one of the issues on social media in terms of autistic representation. In terms of television, I completely agree with what Dan said. I want to see characters who are just incidentally autistic rather than it being a whole show about someone who is autistic and their thing. And I think that's when we'll know that we've got there, when the representation of autism is how it is in terms of what the representation is in society. If it's like 1 in, I don't know, I'm going to guess, is it 1 in 8? Is it 1 in 10? When we're getting that many characters represented and it's not just about their autism, then it will be integrated as part of this is what some people look like, and that is what we see on our TVs and in media. Unfortunately, I agree with Dan as well in that I don't think it's going to be 10 to 15 months, but there has definitely been progress over the last few years, for sure.
Thanks, Ella. Connor?
I think there's a massive responsibility with the big entertainment companies. Disney. I love Disney. I'm going to throw the blame towards them. They have such big franchises like the Disney Princess franchise, the Marvel, Star Wars, etc. Why is there not an autistic Disney princess yet? Yeah, there might be with Elsa. We don't know. Why isn't it explicitly stated? Marvel, I've recently watched Eternals, which is a film which the main cast is of 10 people, and the promotion around that has been like, oh, this is the first Marvel cast that is representative of the human population. There's no autism. You know, that's the kind of point I want to be. I will feel happy. Get to the big blockbusters. Get to the films that make $1 billion, and then that is when we are truly in mainstream representation. But as everyone else has said, it's not the focus. It's just an attribute that the characters have.
It's been absolutely fascinating listening to you guys today. I want to give my thanks to Dan Jones, Ella Tabb, Tylan Grant and Connor Ward. I think there's so much to drill down into there. I feel like we've just touched the surface, but we can also see that we really do have quite some way to go. There's some really positive moves and some good information coming forward, but there's still a lot more to be had in order to make it good for all of our community, including those who are coming into our community, those little children that want to watch stuff on telly. We need to have stuff on social media and on telly where it's proper representation. Thank you for listening today, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Autism in Conversation with Auticon. Just to mention, in terms of a community preference language, all episodes in this series were recorded in November 2021. We did our recording and production at the Strathmore Studios in Clerkenwell, London. It was engineered and edited by Billy Godfrey. Music was by the Lethargies. If you'd like to know more about the next show or would like further information about how Auticon can help, please visit www.auticon.co.uk. That's all from us this time. Bye for now.